I attribute that change in my brain to the naltrexone, but also just giving myself the opportunity to see those things because you're not going to realize them unless you try it. And I really do appreciate the coach that I met with once because she pushed me. She said, it's going to be uncomfortable. First time you do something without drinking, it's going to be uncomfortable.
Welcome, everybody. It's Katie Lane with Thrive Alcohol Recovery. And today I have with me Jay. I'm really excited to have you here, Jay, because you are currently on the Sinclair Method, and we're going to talk more about this, but you are not at the end of your Sinclair Method journey yet. You're still kind of in the middle of it. Yet I know you were sharing before we hit record that you're really starting to see some encouraging and surprising changes on the method. But I'm excited to talk with you because you're not at your ideal place yet or at the extinction point yet, but you're right in the middle of it and you're seeing progress. So just want to begin, Jay, by thanking you so much for taking time to chat with me.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. So before we jump into your Sinclair Method journey and kind of where you're at today, I always like to go back to the beginning for people to understand a bit more about you and your history with alcohol use and how it is that you knew your drinking was becoming problematic. So can you start there and just tell us a little bit about your history with alcohol and maybe how you knew things were starting to get out of control?
Sure. So I am from a little bitty town where there wasn't much to do growing up, and culturally, it was almost the expectation that that's just what kids did is you went and rode around back roads and drank beer. And that was all good and fun. And it was a habit that, I think everyone always thinks, oh, when you grow up, you'll get control of this. You won't be a silly kid anymore. But then it continued to just carry over. And it's one of those things that I don't think there's been a a specific point that I said, oh, this is rock bottom. This is out of control. But more like peaks and valleys. I mean, there were plenty of times, even as a young person, when you have those moments where you black out, you do things that you regret, and then as you get into like a different stage of your life, then it looks different. Like, you're no longer blacking out, but you're maybe at your husband's company party and you say something to make an ass of yourself. And so it's like peaks and valleys. Like you think, oh, I have control of this. And at the same time, you'll be doing things like crushing it. Like I feel like I am still doing a good job raising my family. I'm still a good wife. I actually homeschool our kids, and I feel like I do a good job with that. But yet at the same time, there are times I'm like, dude, this is not how life is supposed to look. I'm not supposed to have this reliance upon alcohol. I shouldn't feel like whenever I'm in a social situation that if there's no alcohol, this isn't going to be fun. And that's very much how I feel. And I'm getting better with it. And it's such a relief to not have that feeling. But it was to the point that even like when friends would invite me for their kids' birthday parties, I would think, good God, I hope there is some beer there because if there's not, this party is going to suck. And it's a kid's birthday party. And I realized it's not how I want it to be. And besides that, as I'm aging, you start to see more concerns about your own mortality. And I thought this can't be good for me. So that's when I really decided, I guess about 2 years ago, that I wanted to see things change.
You said so many things there that I was just like over here nodding my head because you said, you started drinking, as a youth and you think, oh, I'm going to grow out of this one day. I had the exact same thought. I've heard from others as well. We think it's just a phase and we'll rein it in when, marriage or career or family. And then we are surprised at how difficult it is to control it. And yeah, just those times where you feel like you're succeeding in these other areas of life. By the way, mad props to homeschooling your kids. I can imagine that's really difficult, but oh my gosh, so worthwhile. But like you said, you're crushing in these other areas, and the alcohol use disorder is like a thorn in your side, and it's like incongruent. It's like, that's not who I am. Why does that keep happening? And there's so much shame that goes around it when we try to get it under control and we just can't. So I know what you just shared, a lot of people were going to be able to relate to that. So I would love to hear, like, what was your drinking like before you found TSM or right before? Like, I know you mentioned kind of blacking out at your husband's party or doing or saying things you regretted. Can you kind of paint a picture for us and like the week in the life or the day in the life of just what your routine was looking like with alcohol?
Sure, yeah. So it's one of those things that, like you said, it kind of sneaks up on you. I was formerly a teacher, and of course, being a professional, you have to kind of have parameters on your drinking, and you can't show up to work drunk or you get fired. So, that kind of put some structure to my day. And then when we got to the point that we decided it made more sense for me to be at home, that at first I did not ever day drink. I thought, no, I'm here. I'm responsible for educating our kids. I'm here. I need to be the responsible adult at home. But then I think really COVID had a lot to do with it. When you see the world falling apart, you're like, hey, this definitely validates like my wanting to drink at noon. And so that's when things really like the wheels started to fall off. And it wasn't that I wasn't doing what I should be doing. I was still getting everything done. I just realized that I could do that and drink. But of course, that puts lots of limitations on your day because then when you want to run to the store to get a gallon of milk, you're like, hey, I've had 5 beers. I can't do that now. So that was kind of a big push to see like, hey, this isn't working. This isn't practical. But at the same time, I continued it, and it normally didn't seem like anything out of line to usually start drinking by about 2 in the afternoon. And I'm solely a beer drinker. I'll occasionally have wine, but I've never been a liquor drinker. So it's one of those things that I could drink from 2 in the afternoon up until the time I went to bed at 10. And that's just what it looked like. And usually when I'm at home, I was never out of control, slurring, passing out, anything along those lines. But it was to the point that I could maintain that and still function, but I knew that wasn't how I wanted to function.
Yeah. Gosh, and the COVID thing, I hear that from so many people. Like maybe their drinking was borderline problematic before, but then COVID kind of tipped it over the edge. Or if it was problematic, it just became even worse, especially the day drinking. Like I've heard that so many times where people maybe they day drink occasionally, but then with COVID, it started to become a daily thing and earlier and earlier and earlier. Yeah, it's the struggle is real. My goodness. Um,
Yeah. I'm glad to hear you say that because I always thought, is this just me? But I feel like culturally it's become much more of an acceptable thing. Like I don't remember as a kid, I don't remember seeing people drink mimosas regularly, at brunch. Like it, it was normal to start at 5. That's what I saw. And I feel like now culturally, there's just this huge shift in our culture that everyone just accepts like drinking, day drinking, drinking in the morning. And yeah, all those people who do that,
yeah.
they're they're enablers for people like me.
I know. No, and it's so true in the marketing, like you see the towels that say like rosé all day or,
Right.
like first coffee and champagne or something like that. And I remember feeling
Yeah.
so like confused. I'm like, on one hand, it's totally celebrated and normalized. And so I do it, but on the other hand,
Right.
it's just this destructive thing. Like I imagine for you starting at 2 p.m. until 10 p.m., like you don't feel great by the end of the day. And maybe most of the day is a blur. And I mean, I just know that from my day drinking days.
Yeah.
So it's like, this isn't what it's supposed to, or this isn't what they say it looks like, right?
Right. Right. And also, I don't know, with day drinking, it also, I don't know, it kind of counterintuitively made me more productive and less productive
Yeah.
at the same time. Because for me, it was always this, hey, once I get everything off of my checklist, then I can drink. And so, man, I would work like a mad woman. I would like chug coffee. I would get through the kids' lessons. I would clean the house. I'm a runner. I'm actually an ultra runner, which makes like no sense that I have the discipline to run 50 miles, but I don't have the discipline to quit drinking. But
The insanity of
I
alcohol use disorder, honestly. Yeah.
right, right. Yeah. So I would get through my to-do list say, okay, look at me, go get them. I did all my to do things. Now it's time to start drinking. Yay. And so it was like that carrot that I would dangle for myself. And that, I always thought, oh, that's a good thing. That makes me productive. But no, because after 4 p.m., I'm not so productive. I'm drinking. So it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. I know, and one thing I wanna say too quickly is, like, clearly, I think obviously clearly you look really fit, and I think one thing I see on my comments, a lot of people say, "You don't look like someone who had an alcohol addiction," and I think that's the thing, like, people like you and the majority of people out there like me and others, we struggle with this in secret, and yes, there's that severe alcohol addiction case where almost anyone can see with the brown paper bag in the side of the road, but I think there's way more people like you and me who are your everyday individuals, successful otherwise in life, but the alcohol is becoming more and more problematic. So it's so interesting to me that you're this like fitness person, ultra marathoner, which again, mad respect for that. That's not my thing. But like, and you also struggle with alcohol. So just because you're into health and fitness does and you're a homeschooler and you have kids does not mean that you're immune to an alcohol use disorder, right?
Right, right. And I think it's a hard thing too for others to wrap their mind around whenever, if I looked like I was haggard, then I can see friends stepping in and being like, hey, let's slow it down. Let's do something that's not related to drinking. But when you look like you have it all together, people assume you have it all together, and they're not saying that they're like working to my detriment, but they're also in a place where they don't realize that, hey, no, this is not the direction you should be leading me. Like, let's go to the park and go for a hike. Let's not go to a bar.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and what you said too about the day drinking making you productive, I've heard other people tell me that they would clean really well when they had a few drinks in them and it became harder for them to clean without alcohol. So that wasn't exactly what you said, I know, but I've just heard other people talk about how this very bizarre thing where like the first few drinks, they're just like super motivated and they're doing this, and that.
Yeah.
And then of course, as the drinks continue on, you become less so, but it has that effect in some way where it can almost ignite our motivation for cleaning or whatever other tasks we have to get done.
Right. You get that euphoric buzz, like doing the mundane, the things that normally are just drudgery, but you're
Yeah.
like, hey, um if I can have this fun thing going on during it, then it makes it less mundane. And so let's do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Before we jump into your TSM experience, I was wondering if you could tell me, did your husband or any loved ones know you were struggling with alcohol, or was it something you kept to yourself?
Um, I would say I mostly kept it to myself. And I don't know, my husband, even to this point, has never, I don't think we've ever had like a true heart to heart about it. I
Yeah.
think he, just like a lot of people, like you said, they see you functioning, they see you doing all the things and doing them, adequately well. And they just assume, oh, well, that's just part of who she is. She has it under control.
Yeah.
But um, at the same time, he also, I mean, he has been aware that, oh, I know why you don't want to go to this meeting, because this meeting, like say there was a meeting at church I needed to go to. He's like, you don't want to go to this meeting at 6 p.m. because you'll have already started drinking. Like, yeah.
Yep.
So he did realize that it was factoring into a lot of things in my life. However, I don't think he realized the extent of it. And even now, it's one of those things that I still kind of hold my cards pretty close to my vest, just because I guess maybe I don't want him to see me
Hmm.
like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Something I also relate to, and I think many others as well, just like I don't know if you did this, but like the secret drinking. Like my husband knew I liked to drink. He knew I overdid it on occasion, but I really did my best to hide it from him. And he doesn't have an issue with alcohol, so he doesn't know what to look for. He didn't realize I had liquor stashed away or that I was sneaking it when he wasn't looking. And yeah, I just understand where you're coming from with that. And I think a lot of us, we kind of get in this habit of keeping it to ourselves, which almost makes it more problematic just because we isolate and we don't want the opinions of others, especially if they don't understand what it's like to struggle, or we don't want them breathing down our neck. So
Yeah.
always curious just to hear how the loved ones if they're involved in it in any way.
Mhm.
So let's jump into your TSM journey. So when did you start on the Sinclair method? Like how long ago from today that we're speaking?
It was actually, let's see, it was back in July. So, that, I guess about 9 months ago.
Okay.
Yeah, so I actually had initially found the group Moderation Management.
Yeah.
And I thought, hey, look, this is brilliant. This is what I want to do. I want to moderate. Yeah, I don't want to quit. Like quitting just was terrifying, like positively terrifying. And so I thought, I'm gonna try this. And it's a great group and like reading, keeping up on their Facebook page, there's so much support. And I thought this is what I can do because I can do hard things. Yeah, I can cut back.
Yeah.
And I think I tried that. I want to say it was probably about a year ago was when I tried that. And the first few days, I'm like, okay, look at me. Yay, I'm having 3 beers and then stopping. And then, yeah, my curve went like this, like 3 beers, and then the next few days just shot right up. And I realized I can't, my brain just has that little voice in there constantly in my ear, like, hey, let's drink, let's drink, let's drink.
Yeah.
And I realized I can't. But through the Moderation Management Facebook page, I saw several people referencing TSM, and I had no idea what it was. I'd never heard of it. The only medication I'd ever heard of before was like the antabuse or whatever
Hmm.
it is that you makes you completely abstain. So I'd never heard of it. So I started looking into it and thought, ooh, do I want to do this? I'm one of those people that like taking Advil is not something I usually do. So I'm like, do I really want to take a prescription drug? But yeah, it's worth a shot. Something needs to change. So I was really lucky because I thought about it. I'm like, I read up on it. I read the book, and then I went to my doctor, just family doctor, and told him, I think I'm drinking too much. I really like to quit. And of course, I expected it. First words out of his mouth are like, "Are you considering AA?" I was like, "Nope, no, not going to do it." And so I wasn't surprised by that. But the next words out of his mouth were, "Have you heard of this drug called naltrexone?" I'm like, "Yes, and that's actually why I'm here." And
Oh
it
my
was
gosh.
yeah, it was so great. And I was like, wow, I didn't think you would have heard of it. He's like, well, yeah, I am a doctor. And I'm like, okay. I was like, well, do you know how it works? He said, yeah, I have a vague understanding. So I had printed out everything I could find on it. Like, even the literature that's specifically for doctors. And I had it all in a file folder. I'm like, well, in case you're not sure, here it is. He's like, okay, good. Thank you for giving me that. I'll read up on it further, but I can go ahead and write your prescription right now as long as you'll fulfill the obligation of like doing blood work and just keeping up on it to make sure you're doing okay like that. And so it was really easy getting the prescription, and I'm so glad that he was so open to it. And so yeah, I got it, and I don't think I'd even told anyone that I was going to get it. And then my husband was like, "What? What are you taking? You're taking a pill. That's weird." And so I kind of filled him on what it was, and then we actually had a little bit of a bump in the road because sorry, I hope I don't cry.
That's okay. Take your time.
Yeah, so right after I started on it, I found out I was pregnant. I was like, "Whoa, that's crazy," because I'm not young, and so found out I was pregnant. So of course I stopped it. But a few weeks into pregnancy, I lost the baby.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh,
Sorry,
wow.
sorry to cry about it.
No.
Like I'm really lucky. I have a big family already. So, and I've had other losses. So I was kind of expecting it, but 'cause I am older. But anyway, so that was hard. And then, but it was also good because pregnancy has always been a time that I never have problems stopping when I'm pregnant. Like the minute I find out I'm pregnant, it's never a thing that, oh, maybe I'll just sneak a couple drinks. It's never been a problem for me. So I quit completely during that time that I was pregnant. So it was almost like I had a little bit of momentum. going into it when I began with the naltrexone again because I had already stopped drinking for a few weeks. And so that was kind of nice because I had some momentum and started in on it. And yeah, and it was one of those things that when I started it, I did feel kind of, I don't know. I know some people feel like nauseous whenever they first started it, and I did. And I wasn't sure if that was the case or if it was actually just leftover hormones, pregnancy hormones causing morning sickness. But at any rate, I stuck with it. You know, I did like the half pill for a few days, and then I realized if I ate a meal with it whenever I would take it, that it was fine. So, so yeah, I got started on it then. And I wanted to be like the go-getter who was the person who took it and was like, "All right, I'm good." But I started and my drink started creeping back up. I'm like, "Oh man, look at this." I wanted to be like that person who took it and 3 weeks later I'm good. Like never want to touch alcohol again. But it didn't work that way. And actually at first, then like dealing with the loss of the baby, I was kind of in a bit of a state with that. And so I did be drinking more. And I guess it was right before Christmas then. So that was back in July. I kept thinking, I don't know if this is working, but I'm going to stay the course because I've read that it takes a lot of people several months, even a few years for some people. So I'm going to stay the course. And it was right before Christmas. And that's the time, Christmas, holidays, you expect to be like, I can't handle this. Somebody give me a drink, even if it's 9 a.m. I don't care. I have family coming in. I'm freaked out. I got to deal with this somehow. So I was really pleasantly surprised one day when I had had no alcohol free days, like zero. And I thought, we're going to do this. We're going to have an alcohol free day. And I thought, I'm going to back out of it by like 2 p.m. But I made it and I had one. I was like, hey, that wasn't even that bad. It really wasn't. And within that time, I actually also enlisted the help of a coach that I had found online. And she had told me, she said, okay, good for you if you can have one alcohol free day. If you can have two, you're really going to feel that buzz, that like good feeling buzz. And so the following week I said, all right, we're going to do this. Buckle up. We're going for 2 days in a row. And so I did, and it wasn't unbearable. And so I realized, wow, this is the first time that I've been able to do this in a long time. Like a few years ago during Lent, my Lenten resolution was to not drink, and it it did not go well. Like I think I went 2 days and was just crawling out of my skin. Like I felt like I couldn't even hear what people were saying to me because inside my head, like was the voice like drink, 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 drink. And so it was really remarkable, like around December when I had these 2 days in a row that I didn't have the compulsion to drink. So it was big. So
That
that's
is
when I knew it was working.
Yes, and you said something that I hear often from people where, because okay, let me backtrack a bit. You started on the method in July and you didn't
Mhm.
really have your first alcohol-free day till around Christmas. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So that is like a note for people to encourage people because I know sometimes people can get discouraged if they haven't had an alcohol-free day, in the first month or something, just to stay the course. That's not everyone has alcohol-free days early on. And the other thing you said is that it was actually easier than you thought it was going to be. And that's something I hear often. And you describe it so well. Whereas before TSM, alcohol free days are almost torture. Like you said, you can't even think about what people are saying because you're just like, drink, drink, drink. I need a drink. So I feel like we have that experiential memory of alcohol free days, and it can almost like trip us up from even trying an alcohol free day on TSM, which that's okay. I think there's something to be learned from it all. But what you said is something I hear regularly where after someone's been on the method for a while and then they have that coveted first or second alcohol free day, they're like, oh, it wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. And that's a really pleasant surprise. So I just appreciate you speaking to that. And it's interesting that you were surprised as well because you made the commitment. You're like, oh, I'll probably back out later today, but you didn't. And so do you remember? I know it was a little while ago, but do you remember like that first alcohol-free day, and what was it that made you kind of see it all the way through? Were you motivated? Were you busy? What was it? Because that's another challenge people have is they commit to it and then 2 or 3 in the afternoon or 5 PM, they're like, "Ah, screw it. I'm just gonna have my now and drink." So, do you remember what
Um,
made you see it through?
it was like some not planned choices, but at the last minute, some very deliberate choices. It wasn't like I'd even planned that day to be an alcohol-free day, but then like, okay, we're gonna do this. Last minute, just decided we're gonna do this. And so at the last minute, I made some choices. I thought, okay, I have to be out of the house because for me, I very strongly associate cooking supper with drinking. Like those just go hand in hand. And so I intentionally delayed my run that day because I know that's something I never back down from. Is I thought I'm gonna have to go on my run and I'm gonna put my run at night because I know I'm not gonna sham out of that and I have to have not drank so I can drive myself to go to the park to run. So I was very deliberate about that. And then I had the benefit too of going for a run and doing something that I knew would give me that endorphin rush, much like alcohol that was not alcohol. So I did that and that helped a lot. And for a while, I continued that trend that I would, anytime I was going to do an alcohol-free day, I would intentionally like plan my run then because I knew that's something I would enjoy that I could replace drinking with.
And I love that tip because for those of you that aren't runners or whatever, that's something I always recommend to people on their first alcohol-free days or first series of them is just to have that reward in place, whether it's a run or you take yourself out to an ice cream or a movie or go buy a new shirt or something, just something you can look
Yes.
forward to because alcohol is that thing we're looking toward. But when you can just plan ahead a bit and be like, oh, I'm going to go get that pedicure at 5 o'clock instead of open up my wine, or I'm going to go
Yeah.
whatever it is. I think that's so, it seems so maybe insignificant and silly, but it really does help to just make that habit shift because we need to consciously shift that habit or else we're going to keep doing the default choice of, the ritual of drinking every night, like many of us get
Uh-huh.
stuck in.
Absolutely. Yeah. I did find too that shopping, I'm not much of a shopper, but I thought during this weird time I have that I'm not drinking, I realized, hey, I can get on Poshmark and look for things I want.
Yeah.
And so then I would make the deal with myself, okay, if I can make it 2 days, then I'm going to get those jeans. And
Yes.
so, yeah, I started doing that.
It's fun because I feel like you start to experience other rewards in life that maybe came secondary or tertiary after alcohol. It's like you incentivize yourself for the alcohol-free days or even for like moderate drinking days. Okay, if I have 2 drinks, each night this week instead of 4, then I'll do this. And it's like kind of giving ourselves that opportunity to practice delayed gratification because with drinking, I feel like we're just, for me at least, it was just this impulsive habit that I just did without thinking about it. And I didn't have any control. But with naltrexone, it starts to give us that control and we can kind of think ahead and teach ourselves other things that are rewarding. Like, yeah, I love shopping on Poshmark, by the way. You can find such good deals on there.
Right?
Yeah.
Um,
Uh, yeah, go ahead.
um, yeah, another tip that I found that people gave some Facebook group I'm on. I don't remember which TSM group it is, but one day I knew it was going to be a struggle. I don't remember what specifically was going on that day, but I knew that it was going to be one of those days that I wanted to drink. And so I asked for tips. Someone said, okay, whenever you want to drink, say, all right, I'm going to not take my naltrexone until an hour after the time that I would normally take it. And then after you take it, if you still want to drink, go. And so I did. Instead of like normally when I start feeling those stressors, I go ahead and pop my naltrexone so I'm ready to go if I need to drink. Um, but I delayed the taking of it, and I felt like that delay made me think whatever it was that was stressing me out and realize whatever it is that I'm in my brain is a really big deal right now is not that big of a deal. It's not an excuse to drink tonight. So because I hadn't taken my naltrexone, I chose not to drink that night, and it wasn't hard. So I felt like that was a really good tip because I feel like I had gotten in the habit of as soon as I started to feel that itch, I wasn't practicing any self control at all. I would immediately take my naltrexone and say, okay, 60 minutes, go. Yeah.
Exactly. And I appreciate you bringing that up, Jay, because what you spoke to is kind of, I feel like, the two reasons that a lot of us drink, whether it's the rewarding effects of it. So instead, you're shopping on Poshmark or going for your run, but then also the coping piece of it. And that can be an automatic behavior as well. We have a stressful day and we get in this automatic habit. Before TSM, we were just drinking, but now we're taking naltrexone and then drinking, and that becomes its own habit. And just what you did, that little like delay it a bit and just kind of be with your emotions, try to cope with it in a different way and see how you feel afterward, like viewing it as an experiment, if you will. And one thing I like to say, and maybe you'll relate to this as an athlete, but it's like I feel like we all have this coping muscle that we're equipped with naturally to be able to cope with the stressors of life. But when we rely on alcohol, that muscle becomes very feeble because we never exercise it. And when we are able to exercise it, just like when we go to the gym and lift weights, our muscle gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And so the more we practice these other coping skills and strengthen our coping muscle, the easier it becomes to deal with stress in life. And before we know it, alcohol's not even really on the radar anymore to cope with those things. It's like, oh, a stressful day. Like, I got it. And I don't need the alcohol anymore. Or, maybe I need less of it or something. So that's great.
Right.
Anything you want to speak to with that?
Um, no, I completely agree with you. That skill, yeah, like a muscle, it just atrophied completely.
Yeah.
Like that was my go-to response. It was my go-to response for everything, for joy, for happiness. Like, oh, let's celebrate by drinking. Or with sadness or stressors, we would cope by drinking. And so it's um it's so nice to I almost feel like I had blinders on, like I couldn't even see past alcohol, like I couldn't see any other possibilities. And I attribute that change in my brain to the naltrexone, but also just giving myself the opportunity to see those things because you're not going to realize them unless you try it. And I really do appreciate the coach that I met with once because she pushed me. She
Yeah.
said it's going to be uncomfortable. First time you do something without drinking, it's going to be uncomfortable. And I really appreciated that advice so much because I think we think in your brain whenever you start the naltrexone, like, oh, it's just going to be rainbows and butterflies, and I'm going to have this beautiful life where I, you know, go to brunch and I don't look around and see other people drinking a mimosa and want one. Um, but then when you have those experiences, I feel like it makes you realize, hey, this is something I can do. This is a possibility. One of my friend's birthdays was a couple months ago, and we went. And I knew that the restaurant. I looked online in advance. I saw their menu, like, oh, mimosas and candied bacon. They go so well together. And we got there, and fortunately, I'm really blessed to have some friends who don't drink. Two of them actually had experiences in their childhood with parents who were drinkers that were really bad, and so I feel like it worked out really great that I had these friends in my life at this time because they actually, that day at the brunch, I shared my journey because they came in. I was the first to arrive. So I just ordered a mocktail. I thought, that sounds good, like fruity, juicy. They came in, they're like, what are you drinking? I was like, it's a mocktail. And, knowing me, they were like, oh, really? And so, yeah, at that point, I shared with them what was going on, and they told me about their own childhoods, and it just really was a great day because not only did I have that experience of being somewhere and having a fun time with something that didn't involve alcohol, but also just hearing their own stories. And one of my friends who is just a rock, like I'm a crier, I cry at everything. She is a rock and never cries at anything. She started telling her story and just like welled up with tears. And I thought, oh man, if it affected her like that, like her own childhood, what am I doing to my kids?
Oh,
So
wow.
made me so grateful that day seeing that and thinking, I'm doing something better. I'm getting better for my
Mm.
kids. So
Yeah.
it was a big day.
Wow, that's so amazing. Wow, what an incredible story. And for you, because like you said, and like your coach told you, it's like it's going to be uncomfortable doing something new. And I'm sure that was like somewhat awkward experience, but it's so different when you're not fighting that drink, 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 like talk in your head, when
Hmm.
it's you don't really have a craving. Like, sure, you could drink, but a mocktail's fine, it's gonna do the job, and you get through that, and it's just, you have that lived experience, and it's almost like, okay, like, I can see myself becoming more of a person like this, a person who gets a mocktail at brunch and doesn't need the champagne with it or whatever, so
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
really powerful.
I feel like it is. It's kind of like picking up a living room that your kids have just trashed with toys. Like each toy is different, you know?
Yeah.
Like that day I dealt with the brunch. Right now I'm planting the garden. And for me, this is really hard because I mean, pretty much everything for me, but garden, I always think, oh, garden, let's plant the garden and, have some beers while we do it. Like take our little cooler out there.
Yeah.
And so right now, like, I'm struggling thinking, how am I going to do this? How am I going to go like garden without drinking? And so, yeah, so
And how are you
that's
doing that? Like, where are you at right now with that?
I am still struggling with that one. I was actually thinking, yep, in a few minutes, I've already taken my naltrexone. I'm going to go out and hoping 3 beers. Like, okay, 3 beers, that's all I need. Get through. I can plant the peppers and
Yeah.
plant the corn.
Yeah.
Just do that. So I'm
Yeah.
trying to put some parameters on it, but man, I feel like every experience that your brain has grown to associate with alcohol is something you have to break, and you have to go through that. Like, yeah, I don't like this,
Yeah.
and then once you get through it, you realize, hey, it's okay.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know. And another thing I found that's really weird is cravings. Like my craving for alcohol, I feel like my brain had wired itself to not really fully recognize what my cravings were. I remember one day I wanted to drink so badly, and I came home and that was one of those days I said, I'm not even taking my naltrexone yet because I'm going to give it time. I thought, dude, I'm hungry. And I ate. And after I ate, I realized I don't want to drink anymore. And I think that my brain was actually confusing hunger with wanting to drink. And I don't know if that's a thing that people do, like associate cravings and they're just blind to what their body really wants. But
Yeah.
that's how I felt that day.
Yeah. No, that's it absolutely does happen to people. Maybe you've heard of the acronym HALT, where it's like hungry, angry, lonely, tired, and then there's a bored people add on top of it. But it's like you said earlier, like you had blinders on. Alcohol is the solution to every problem, even hunger, or for me, anger or boredom or loneliness, without
Yeah.
taking a step back and saying, okay, I can drink, I can take naltrexone and drink, but let me check in with myself to see what other need I might have right now. And I've heard others say that as well. And I think there is some physiological thing happening where we can confuse a hunger or craving for some type of food for alcohol, and we can't discern the difference. And just giving yourself the chance to um try something else first. That was what I did on Fridays. I always tell the story, but I would always drink a bottle of wine every Friday night. And instead I was like, let me get a really like indulgent, satisfying meal. For me, that was like a big cheeseburger and a milkshake. I was like, let me do that and see if that makes me not want to drink wine. And that's how I broke my bottle of wine a night on Fridays. And of course, a burger is not ideal, but for me, it was better than a bottle of wine. And I wanted to start with that. And so very interesting that you've practiced that and seen that allow it sounds like it allowed you to have an alcohol-free day by just eating. Is that right?
It did. It
Yeah.
did. Because once I got past that, I didn't have the craving for
Yeah.
alcohol anymore. So it was a strange thing.
That's so
Um,
cool.
yeah.
So, okay, so you're about 9 months into the method, like, and I heard you say you're gonna go garden after this and have a few beers, which is like, that's kind of part of this journey is like, okay, I don't know what that would have looked like before. Like, I guess what would have a gardening scenario like that look like? Would there have been a parameter around a goal of 3 drinks, or would it have been more? Or if you don't mind
Oh,
sharing?
no, there were never any parameters
Okay.
around anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only parameter was when I ran out.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Um, so yeah, I am still having problems finding the breaks. I really wish that I could get better about saying, I'm going to have X amount and I'm going to stop there.
Yeah.
So I have found a little bit of success with that if I very consciously say, okay, after X amount, after 2 or 3, I'm going to have to drink 2 or 3 sparkling waters, and then I can't have another until I've had my water.
Yeah.
But it's hard to find the breaks for me still.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping to get better at that. And I don't know, at times it makes me think maybe I'm going to have to be one of those people that gets so I almost completely abstain because of my inability to find the breaks.
Mm.
But I hope that's not the case. I hope I
Yeah.
can just be a normal person at some point and say, all right, I've had two, I've had three, I'm fulfilled. I get to do what I wanted to do. Now I can stop. So I hope I get there.
Yeah, and I hope that's encouraging for people listening too, because that's a common challenge that I see with individuals where they may be successful with alcohol-free days, but then when they do drink, there's still times where they feel like they overdo it. And I think the approach that you're doing of just trying to kind of, habit stack as they call it, where it's like, okay, I'm not going to have a third drink until I have two sparkling waters first, or whatever it is for the individual. I think those are the things that really help us to change that habit over time. And I've heard people even say like that are wine drinkers where it just doesn't feel right them leaving some wine in the glass because that's their usual, or wine in the bottle I should say, because that's their usual dose. And so they start to notice naltrexone giving them that off switch, but they keep drinking anyway because they're like I drink a bottle of wine, that's who I am. And I think it kind of goes deeper than that, and like understanding like that's an identity perhaps you're holding on to, and whether we're aware of it or not, it's like, okay, how can I change my identity, to what a quote unquote normal drinker would do? And that's what I would started asking myself on the method of like, what would a normal drinker do right now? And that helped me kind of work backwards. Like, well, they probably would have food and, pace themselves and, not drink 3 shots of vodka behind their husband's back or something like that.
Right, right.
Yeah.
That's interesting to hear you say, what would a normal drinker do? I read that tip somewhere, and it's weird how like you picture different people. I don't know why. I have one friend who she lives in another state, so I don't have that much contact with her. But I still think about her. I'm like, what would Heidi do? I want to be
Yeah.
like Heidi because she's a person who I know likes wine, and I know she does enjoy drinking with her husband occasionally,
Yeah.
but I never see her overdo it.
Yeah.
So that's funny that say that about like what would a normal person do, because I have my role model in my head and I
Yeah.
refer to her often.
That's funny. Yep, I had someone in mind too when I did that. And I think, I mean, you're 9 months in, that's a little ways into the method, but I just as a coach, I've just seen people continue to have progress, 16 months, 18 months, 2 years. And so if you're committed to this, I think you're going to see those changes that you want. And sometimes there's certain habits that are just more stubborn to break than others. And to your point, what you said earlier, it's like you've got to go through all of these different experiences of how you've drank in the past and lived them. I mean, I don't think you've planted a garden, on TSM yet. It's like, okay, well, I need to redefine what I want that to look like and I need to practice it. And so, yeah, it's a process. And I think that's why TSM really does need time to work.
Yeah.
So, I have a couple more questions for you as we start to wrap up. I just have to ask you because I'm not a parent, and I often hear from moms, particularly, who they're on TSM and, I think as a parent, I imagine you use, not you necessarily, but women or moms use alcohol to cope sometimes with the stress of parenting. And so like, how have you kind of done the changes that you've been able to accomplish so far with TSM? How have you navigated that while also being a mom and kind of dealing with the stresses of parenthood? Have you found other coping tools or skills, or what does that look like for you, so that you're not leaning on alcohol as much?
I feel like one thing that I've done, and this may not be something that is for everyone, like I think it depends upon the age of your children and your relationship and their maturity level. But my 14 and my 11-year-old are aware of what I'm doing. And um, so when I got my naltrexone, I told them, you're going to see me taking this. And this is because, as you probably noticed, my brain is not wired like the brains of the mamas of some of your friends. You see that I drink regularly, and that's not normal. That's
Mm.
not what a person should do. And I want you to know that because you probably inherited this gene just like I inherited this gene. So this is what I'm doing. And it's weird because I kind of felt like it went in one ear and out the other with them. And it was 2 nights ago, actually, my 11-year-old daughter, she said, "You're doing better, I can tell." I was like, "You notice?" And she's like, "Yeah, I can see that you're drinking less." I was like, "Oh." Good. It made me so happy. So I don't know if that level of transparency works for every
Yeah.
family, but like I said, my husband's still kind of, I don't know. He's in a weird place about it. He doesn't comment on it a whole lot. Whenever I do make comments, he's very neutral about it.
Yeah.
So it was really good to feel like one of my kids is in my
Yeah.
corner at least. And I'm not saying my husband's not in my corner, but just to have that cheerleader and to, have somebody say, "Hey, I noticed this. Good for you." And
Yeah.
so that made me really happy. Aside from that, just man, just thinking about it and just I don't know, it's a lot. And it's a stressor to think that I have these kids and I want to see them have kids and
Yeah.
I want to live for a long time. So just knowing you want to stay healthy for them, that's been a big motivator in itself too, because I'm fortunate I'm really healthy right now, but
Yeah.
it's the cumulative effect of alcohol abuse over the years is going to catch me at some point. So I want to change for that reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And I think that's awesome to that you can be that transparent with your kids because I feel like it's better than, there were certain things my parents just never talked to me about and I knew, but like we never verbalized it. And I was like, man, how different would have things been if we would have just talked about it and they would have been more open about it, including alcohol and other things. So I think that's really cool. And especially that they notice that you're seeing you're having changes in your drinking.
Yeah.
So, just to kind of wrap up and I guess get clarity on where you're at now. I know you don't feel like you've reached your goal or ideal relationship with alcohol yet. Like, what does your relationship with alcohol look like today? Like a week in the life, if you will.
It kind of depends upon the week.
Yeah.
A few weeks ago, I remember I completely abstained from alcohol except for Sunday. And it felt rather easy. It wasn't hard. And then a couple weeks later, our shower started leaking, and we realized that we'd have to retile it. My vehicle went to the shop, and life happened. And when life happened, I reverted. And I think that week maybe I don't remember, maybe only 2 alcohol-free days.
Yeah.
But I am still like I'm fully maintaining my Friday is always alcohol free for
Mm.
me these days. And so that's the thing. And I am trying to up it so that I get back to that. Like I would love to have another 6 alcohol free day week
Yeah.
um again. And so and I kind of think of that as like then I can have my Sunday fun day. And but what's weird is that week that I had my Sunday fun day, I want to say I had no a moderate amount for myself.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I want to continue to stay the course and
Yeah.
you know, um, hopefully have more of the 6 alcohol free day weeks.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, when you get through those, it's like, wow, I know this is possible. But then, of course, like life happens, like you said, and it can be up and down. And I'm curious, do you get discouraged at all, kind of in the peaks and valleys of TSM?
for sure. Yeah.
Mm.
Um, yeah. Shortly after I had my first bouts of alcohol free days, and I want to say even posted on Facebook and said like, "Hey, I just had this weird day where I didn't feel like drinking. Like I feel like like a switch has been flipped in my brain." And I remember someone commented like, "Good for you, but no, it's a journey, and your journey will spiral. It's not linear."
Yeah.
I was like, "Mm-mm, not me. Nope, I'm better than that. I'm good. I'm cured." Yeah, no.
Yeah, there was some wisdom in that response.
Yeah.
I know.
Um,
And I think sometimes people can panic at that place, like, oh no, it's not working anymore. But just, I think that's again, we're having the right expectations of that this is a long term treatment protocol. There's ups and downs because I've heard from too many people who are like, oh, I was on it for 2 months and I was still drinking a lot. So I stopped taking it. I'm like, no, like you need time.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, through a Facebook page, I've befriended another mom who is way out of state. We've never met in person, and we're kind of checking in with each other. And she's only been on her journey for, I want to say, 4 months. And she messaged me recently and said, I'm drinking more than ever. And she doesn't have a very strong support network either. And those who are close to her are kind of discouraging to her. I'm like, no, you stick with this. This is so new. And she's managed to have several alcohol free days. So I keep telling her, you've had these at like 4 months. That's huge. I did not have any. And so, yeah, I hope that you realize that, yeah, 4 months, that's like a drop in the bucket, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
stick with it. And I don't know. It's like, I think about, you need to compare yourself like today, right now, to at the start of the journey. Like, don't compare yourself to somebody who's cured because they're cured. They're good, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm better than I was.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's such good advice. Do you have any other tips or words of encouragement for people as we kind of wrap up since you've been on this for 9 months? You're not where you want to be yet, but you've made a lot of progress. What do you have to say to people out there?
Yeah, just stick with it. Every day is not going to be perfect. And a lot of days are going to be really screwed up. And when they are, like, take time, take a breath. Um, I don't want to say don't take your naltrexone, but for me, like, don't just pop that pill and start counting the seconds, you know? Like, think on it and get past whatever that moment is that's really pushing you to want to drink. And for me, I mean, like, sometimes that means, okay, I'm not going to cook the entire supper, but I'm going to chop this onion. If I can chop this onion and get through, then maybe this craving will be past. And some of the time it is. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's great advice. I think that awareness and mindfulness can go really far because it just gives us some space to think about our actions and our relationship with alcohol without that automatic response. So, wow, this has been such a great conversation, Jay. I want to thank you so much for taking time to chat with me. Any other final thoughts before we wrap up for today?
No, thank you for what you do. Like I said, it was so helpful to have a coach, somebody to give me that advice and push and tell me the things that my brain I probably knew, but when you have somebody who has experience telling you that, that's important. So what y'all do is important, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I want to encourage people not to do this alone. Like alcohol can already isolate us. So whether you're getting a therapist support or coach support or program support, just don't do it alone. Reach out. So wow, thank you so much, Jay. I hope you have an awesome evening and awesome time gardening, and
Thank you.
I'll talk to you later.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye bye.